Welcome to Bay Area League Day 2015. We're pleased to have so many league people and league friends here to attend our program addressing climate change in the Bay Area. I'm Linda Craig, President of the League of Women Voters of the Bay Area. As those of you know, the Bay Area organization is an interleague organization of 20 leagues throughout the 9 Bay Area counties. And we have a new league that is just in the process of being formed from Napa. And I'd like you to raise your hands from Napa. They are in the process of forming a league, and they need a certain number of members at one point, and bylaws and whatever. But we're hoping they're successful, and we welcome them as a part of our group. As you know, we monitor at the Bay Area League level. Our activity is primarily addressing the regional agencies in the Bay Area on your behalf. We are very excited about the lineup of speakers today and invite you to read your biographical information in your packets. We will not read that information during the introductions, but you have it for your reference. Also, as you notice, we put a number of information pieces in your packet about the subject of climate change and what various agencies are doing. Also, we are happy that the Bay Area Air Quality Management District has provided their annual report from 2013. Halfway through the packet is information on the composition of climate change in the Bay Area. It's about halfway through the booklet. Here, if you find the page, it says 80%, it's on the right-hand side. So what we're going to be doing today also is some organizations, including the Air Quality District, have brought displays on the side which you'll be able to look at during the lunch hour. The program committee is composed of myself, Ann Draper, who will moderate panel number 2, Rita Norton, who will moderate panel number 3, and Janice Blumenkranz, who arranged the display materials with various other groups. Also, we are videotaping the meeting today, as we have done in the past, and it will be posted on our website, which is www.lwvbayarea.org. Our keynote speaker is Notthoff from the Natural Resources Defense Council, and she is the California Advocacy Director, and welcome in.
Well, thank you all for having me here today. It is really a spectacularly beautiful day, but I'm not supposed to really enjoy this type of weather given our drought right now. But, so today I want to talk about how California is really stepping up to tackle climate change. I know I don't know a lot of football terms, but I do know it's Super Bowl weekend, so I think it is more appropriate than usual to talk about tackling climate change, but I do promise not to have any ball jokes. But what does it mean to tackle climate change, and why is it so important? Now, here in the Bay Area, I think it's fair to say that we've blazed a path for a lot of progressive environmental programs by electing champions to fight for good policies at the local, state, and federal levels, and by direct action as well. But using all the tools to tackle climate change is really the public policy challenge of our time, I think. And I know you all know that, or you wouldn't be here on this Saturday morning, and I do thank you for that. But I think that together, California can really make a difference. So I thought I'd take some time to look at why that's so important and what we can do about it and what's next on the agenda for this year. So first, let's look at why it matters here in California. And I think that one of the first things you can't escape is that what California does matters. And we're now the 8th largest economy in the world. We're the 12th largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions as a single entity, and the size of our market really can influence whole industries. So if you build a clean car that meets California standards, that car is clean wherever it is. for example. It's also important here at home because Californians stand to lose big time if we don't stabilize our climate. We depend on snow for our water supply. The snowpack is the largest reservoir in the state, and a healthy snowpack is essential for winter recreational economy. We're seeing right now that without snow, those ski areas are really hurting badly. Also, our coastal economy is really the economic engine of our state, and including the Bay Area here. And it really generates billions of dollars every year to our economy, and sea level rise threatens to wreak havoc on everything from Southern California beaches to the Santa Cruz Boardwalk to AT&T Park here at home. And of course, a healthy ocean is key to California's really very way of life. Also, our wildlife and natural resources have adapted to the climate that we have here in California. California already has more threatened and endangered species than any other state in the nation, and we need to do all we can to hold on to them now. It's also important to tackle climate change because, as I said, the world is watching. And when AB 32, our bedrock climate law, was enacted in 2006, I can remember telling legislators at the time that if they did this and they mustered the political courage to pass this important bill, that the world would be watching. And lo and behold, it was really nice to be factually accurate, because when that bill passed, it was covered around the world in New Delhi, Tokyo, Paris, and since that time, largely because of inaction in Washington, D.C. until recently, California has had a center seat in many international negotiations on climate change. Everyone from China to Mexico to Ontario, Israel, and beyond is interested in learning how California is taking steps to cut carbon pollution while growing our economy and adding jobs at the same time. It's important for California's economic health and job market, and they both depend on healthy environmental policies. As the leader of the California State Senate, Kevin De Leon, said recently, and I'll quote here, "Green jobs are growing faster than any other industry in our state. Advanced energy employment in California is currently at 432,000, with an increase of 5% over last year. More than 2,000 companies are doing business in California due to its clean energy policies. And just last week, the LA Times reported that jobs in the solar industry jumped 22% in the last year. And I'll just add that we now have more jobs in the solar industry in California than we have in the film industry. Wow. And having these kind of good jobs is also one of the paths that I think California can use to help address the growing problem with income inequality. And then also I want to talk about how tackling climate change is important for our families' health and well-being, and that we're all jeopardized by the health impacts of a warming planet, from increasingly severe weather, the wildfires and their consequences. Last year was the hottest, driest year since they started taking records, and it wasn't even close. We beat the record by 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and predictions are that the temperature would raise by 7 degrees if we don't take steps to stabilize the rate of warming. So with so many wildfires, I'm sad to say that we've been able to collect enough data to really understand some trends. And for example, we now know that there's an association between mothers breathing wildfire smoke and low birth weights in their babies. So now also low-income communities that all too often bear the brunt of the impacts of pollution, for example, asthma, those communities are in line to be very hard hit by the impacts of climate change, and that's not fair. And then finally, it's just important because we can't afford the cost of doing nothing to tackle climate change. It's simply not affordable. higher insurance costs, higher disaster recovery costs, higher health costs, the list goes on. Last year, a bipartisan group of top business leaders took a close look at the economics of climate change, and they concluded in a new report titled Risky Business, that I'll quote again, that if we continue on our current path, many regions of the U.S. face the prospect of serious economic effects from climate change. However, if we choose a different path, if we act aggressively to both adapt to the changing climate and to mitigate future impacts by reducing carbon emissions, we can significantly reduce our exposure to the worst economic risks from climate change. So taken all together, I think that's why I see it so important that we work together to do all we can to tackle climate change. So let me talk for a moment about how I came to this fight, having worked for decades for environmental protection as an advocate, a mother, a daughter, and a lifelong Californian. For years, I worked to protect our coast from rampant development and to stop offshore oil drilling off the coast here. And I fought to keep clean water in our rivers, streams, and kitchen faucets. But increasingly, as the science poured in and the weather events happened again and again, it became starkly clear to me that all that is threatened by the overarching issue of climate change, and that which is the greatest environmental and humanitarian threat of our time. Yes, we need to keep fighting for livable communities, golden hills, and the open fields that make California the place that we love and love to call home. But we need to step up, unless we step up the pace and get others to join us. California can't do it alone. Climate change threatens all we've done to protect California's environment. And it's the issue that connects all of us. So what is California doing? California is doing a lot, and more is on the way. Now, one of the reasons that we've been able to do as much as we have in California is that we've been building the blocks for a clean energy economy for years. We also have the California Air Resources Board, which is in charge of our climate plan, which I think you'll hear more about from Mr. Joya here, but which is, I think, it is widely considered to be the most effective regulatory agency in the world, and the complexity of the issues that they deal with and the forthrightness. So we've been building these blocks for years. We were the first to adopt tough energy efficiency standards for home appliances, utilities, and more. We were the first to inventory carbon pollution emissions so that we had the data we need to reduce emissions effectively. We have an ambitious renewable energy target and rooftop solar goals. We have the first in the nation law for clean cars, known as the Pavley Bill. And we have the first in the nation law for linking transportation and climate, SB 375 by Senator Darrell Steinberg. This bill has led to Plan Bay Area here and to a regional plan in LA that no one would have imagined possible in the birthplace of sprawl. So as AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, builds on and ties these programs together into the most comprehensive program in the world. We've gotten to this point with lots of creativity, entrepreneurial initiative, political courage, and public support, and hard work over time. But now we don't have as much time as we'd like. Scientists tell us that we need to get on a path of cutting carbon emissions significantly soon, like yesterday, to avoid the worst impacts of a warmer planet. But because everyone is watching, California is actually in a very powerful position, unlike any other subnational entity, really, to demonstrate that a healthy economy and a healthy environment can go hand in hand. Governor Brown, and before him, Governors Schwarzenegger and Davis, really understand that California can make a big difference. in the global fight against climate change. Brown used his State of the State address earlier this month to highlight his climate agenda and set out ambitious yet very achievable goals to reach by 2030. So just in quick summary, his first goal is to increase from 33 to 50% the percent of electricity that we get from renewable resources. We're well on our way to meeting, excuse me, we're well on our way to meeting that target with clean jobs and cleaner air as part of the deal. His second goal is to cut current petroleum use in cars and trucks by 50%. So President Obama's landmark clean car rule will be part of the answer to that with ambitious fuel efficiency standards. And that federal rule was also based on California's rule. And also California's ambitious electric vehicle incentives will also be part of the answer to that. He's also going to, his third goal is to double the efficiency of existing buildings, and that will help really generate jobs in all different types of communities. So but that's not all. The governor is all in on this, but he's not alone. As I mentioned earlier, the leader of the state senate is a climate champion, and now Senator Fran Pavley has introduced SB 32, which aims to set new targets for greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 that will get us on the path to really decarbonizing the California economy and reducing emissions by 80% by 2050. Also, Toni Atkins, the Speaker of the Assembly, is a champion, and just here in Oakland last month, she challenged the oil companies to drop their phony AstroTurf campaign against California's programs. So we're not doing this alone, and we're partnering with other countries. One of the biggest opportunities this year is the UN climate negotiations are going to happen in Paris in December, and California will send a delegation. California's already taken the first step and gone to Lima last month and set in motion its leadership position for these negotiations. And just imagine how powerful it would be if California banded with other subnational entities, and which together would make up the third or second largest economic powerhouse in the world, and all of those subnationals demanded climate action. So those are the kind of things that we can do at the international level. And as always, we need to show that we can make it work here in California to be as a model for how ambitious climate programs can work while keeping a healthy economy. So that's how we've done it in California. I think we can do that globally, but we really do need to fight global warming globally. And a big emphasis for what we're going to be doing going forward is to keep California's program going, but also trying to get as many partners as we can in other states and other countries and other subnational entities, so that we really do build a global movement. So I know that California is a place that embraces new ideas, new people, and new challenges, and we're going to need the ideas from all those people to get global warming under control. So I just want to thank everyone for being here. I know we can do this together, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for all you've done. You help us have great people to work with in the state capitol, and without political courage, we couldn't have done any of this. So thank you very much.
So this question is, AB 32 receives funds to mitigate climate change. Who decides how these funds are allocated? Based on metrics. Does high-speed rail qualify?
Okay, start with an easy one, huh? So the funds that AB 32 generates can only be spent to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That's the test. You got to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, because they're under California law, those cap and trade funds are considered fees, and fees have to be related to the purpose for which they've been collected. So the governor and his team have been doing exhaustive analyses on the greenhouse gas reduction potential for high-speed rail. I think the common view is that in the short term, it's not going to be, you're going to have less reductions in the short term than the long term. They're really counting on the long term for being greenhouse gas reductions. They're still going through a lot of that analysis, and of course CARB is going to have to make some determinations that it does meet the requirements of the law before it gets going. And the metrics are, CARB has metrics in terms of greenhouse gas reductions.
Yes, also, you can find more information on what the Air Resources Board is doing on their website. I think it's arbca.gov, right. So there's, and also in your packet is information about AB 32, as it was originally written. This piece is a little bit older, but it has a very good summary of the legislation.
Okay.
Also, we have summarized the governor's plan to cut petroleum use in half by 2030. So there's information there. Here's a little bit of a follow-up on this issue on the cap and trade. It says, can you comment on cap and trade versus carbon tax at a point of extraction in terms of climate change, achieving climate change?
Sure. The important part of the cap and trade is the cap. And that is, with the way that California has designed the cap and trade program, it is a carbon tax. Basically, it's putting a fee on carbon emissions. It's just how you distribute that distinguishes it from some of the other proposals. But one of the things about a carbon tax, we would not support a carbon tax without a cap, because the cap is what is going to drive the emissions down over time.
Thank you. What is the place of nuclear power plants in a global effort to reduce carbon? These are easy questions.
Yeah, these are easy questions. Well, I could talk about California on that, and that is that I think we've had a good example down in Southern California where San Onofre closed down, and the state was able to pull in other utilities and other sources of energy, a lot of them from renewable, that supplanted that. So that I think that there is a carbon-free future that doesn't need to depend on nuclear.
Well, certainly in California.
In California.
Right. Okay. Next question. What are we doing to increase carbon capture?
That's a good question. So in California, there's a number of kind of demonstration projects on carbon capture and sequestration. There's been one in the Chicago area, I think, and there was one proposed in Kern County. I don't think it's been approved yet, but I think it's something that California is looking at. I mean, what we want to do, we're more gung-ho on trying to get more energy out of renewables rather than making it easier to do fossil fuels.
Okay. Now we'll switch gears a little bit. It says, I've heard that the process of making batteries for electric cars is very polluting, the process of making the batteries. Is this true? If so, wouldn't a major shift to electric cars be counterproductive?
I don't know if I know the answer to that one, except that some of these, I think that a lot of the manufacturers are pledging to be carbon neutral in their process, in their production. But I would just say that if Tesla were going to make batteries here in California, we would be able to analyze that through the CEQA process. But now that they're in Reno, I'm not sure we're going to know.
Okay. Next item is, there are people who deny climate change and others who do not believe human actions contribute to climate change. How big a voice do these groups have in California, and what do they propose?
I don't feel like there's anybody in California now that is saying that climate change doesn't exist. I don't know if people saw on TV last fall, I think, John Oliver got Bill Nye on his show this week in tonight, where he said, you know, there's 97% scientists say climate change exists, and maybe 3% who question the science. And he's attacked the mainstream media for making that seem balanced. And he had like 97 Bill Nyes and 3 others. So I don't feel like they're, I think in California we're talking about what are we going to do about it, not whether it's a problem. I wish I could say that about the U.S. Congress. It's just, you know, mind-boggling to me that they continue to stand up and say on the record that this isn't a problem. I think we're the only country in the world that is having this outmoded debate.
Okay, we have some questions about SB 375. Of course, later in the day, many of our panels will talk about what we are doing in the Bay Area, both from air quality, transportation, and social justice. But this question says, SB 375 is the only law that assigns tasks to regions like the Bay Area. Please comment on Plan Bay Area and how to make it more responsive to local communities and more effective in reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so I was very involved in the passage of SB 375, and I think, first off, there's lots of laws that mandate local action, from housing to transportation and lots of other things like that. So I would quibble that SB 375 is not the only one that does that. And certainly, and because in California, land use is controlled at the local level, that's why SB 375 relies on local jurisdictions, and in this case, the metropolitan planning organizations around the state, to design programs that will incentivize locating development closer to transit so that people have a choice to get out of their cars. And here in the Bay Area, it's my understanding that Plan Bay Area does rely on local jurisdictions to do their own zoning and make decisions that work for their community in terms of growth.
Thank you. Next question is, I understand that methane is even more a factor in global warming. Is this being addressed?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. In fact, just this last year, there was a new bill passed in Sacramento that charges CARB with looking at what's known as short-lived climate pollutants. And some of those are much more dangerous than carbon as greenhouse gases. So methane and black carbon are 2 things that the Air Resources Board is working on developing new standards for.
Okay, here's 2 questions about what, in view of the low gas prices today, are there plans to incentivize more electric cars? What do you see as the future of gas prices and its impact on greenhouse gas reduction efforts?
Well, that is a very interesting question, and then it gives me a chance to just reflect a little bit on this phony campaign that the oil companies launched last year, and trying to scare everybody about this hidden gas tax that was going to show up on their bills in January. And I think that the drop in the price of oil and the gallon of gasoline, I think really served to really discredit that type of scaremongering. And also, and it took a lot of, I think Sacramento is, more doubtful of the veracity of oil company claims now than they were before, for sure. And it also, I think, demonstrated that the California policies don't affect the global market and the price of oil. There's so many factors that that make up the price of oil that California's little policies are not one of them. So I think that was certainly was a good lesson learned. And I think that certainly if it's cheaper to drive, we do see when prices go up that people tend to drive less. But I think that, in California, the 40%, the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions is in the transportation sector. So we have developed this three-legged stool for cleaning up the transportation sector, and that's a combination of cleaner fuels, cleaner cars, and our land use policies that give people options to drive less. So we'll still cleaner cars, and I think, and the cleaner fuel, I think, even if they're still driving, it's still going to help.
Thanks. So now we have questions which are on a specific part of climate change. Says you have outlined so many wonderful things that are going on and goals in our state. How do you drive them with the expansion of extreme fuel extraction projects and the expansion of bringing in dirty oil by rail?
I don't drive them there. They don't fit in a clean California energy future. And I think that, the scientists are telling us that we really need to keep most of these fossil fuels in the ground. And I think that, I think you're talking about fracking is what you're referencing there, and crude by rail. And I think that we've got to get, at this point, the price of oil is kind of taking care of some of the fracking expansion. It's not, and also crude by rail. I think that that's starting to make, development of Keystone XL and the tar sands in Canada not as economic as they were, and we might take this opportunity in the lull in the market to develop stronger policies to prevent those from expanding.
Thanks. Later in a later panel, we'll talk more about social justice, but how would you see that social justice is linked to climate change legislation? How are the needs of those sectors?
Well, as I mentioned, I think that we can't have a healthy climate without justice. And I think that one of the things that we saw, and then a lot of these low-income communities are really frontline in some of the worst direct impacts from a warming climate, and certainly air quality is worse in those areas. So I think we have some examples. Just last year, we just passed a bill incentivizing electric vehicles, and one of the things we did with that was to tie that to opportunities for folks to use transit more often, maybe get some funds to give people bus passes so that they don't have to have a car to get around, and to really link our investment into low-income communities. Certainly 25% of cap and trade funds now need to be spent in low-income communities. So I think the combination of investments in communities as well as developing jobs that are accessible to folks in those communities is going to be a key part of our climate justice.
Thank you. Here's a question that's a little more complicated. It says, when discussing greenhouse gas emissions, is the quote, life cycle, unquote, analysis of the project such as high-speed rail being considered? For example, building the trains, the steel, the tracks, etc. Where does that fit?
It has to fit in. The life cycle analysis needs to be part of the equation. I think in particular, the cement that's needed to build a high-speed rail is, cement production is highly polluting, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that the governor and his team have in terms of demonstrating how this is going to reduce greenhouse gases in the long run.
Okay, the next question has to do with solar and its role in reducing greenhouse gas. A town near us is proposing that all new construction in the town must have solar installed. Will that be an idea that can spread? And I guess you could talk also about building related regulations and where these fit.
Okay, well, we have the 1 million solar roof goal, and I think that it would depend on how you know, do you have subsidies to help folks get that on? I think that certainly the cost of solar is coming down, and so we are seeing increased penetration in the market. But there's, I think, in order to reach the governor's goal of 50% by 2030, we're going to have to remove some other market barriers and figure out how to link with other states and all of that. So I think there's some more to be done that's going to help incentivize that and make that more affordable and penetrate the market more thoroughly.
Yes. Now, of course, we've heard, and it's speaking off the top here, proposals that want to reduce, to get to a zero carbon economy by 2050, which is about where we're going to be when you get to 80% below 1990 from practical matter. So the question is, what kind of more drastic things have to be done to reach a target like that? Get to the 80% below 1990 by 2050.
Well, I think that I wouldn't use the word drastic. I think we actually are on a path that can get us there. I mean, we have the technology. We have to provide more transportation options for folks. That's probably the biggest challenge for us here in California, is providing more transportation options and cleaning up the transportation sector.
Okay, here's another question. How are land use changes that promote density along transportation corridors and eliminate most parking meet the transportation needs of an aging population?
Well, I think that everyone has their own personal preferences, but what we're seeing is actually with the aging of the baby boomer generation is that folks are wanting to live closer in. They're wanting to live places where they can walk instead of being isolated in a suburb where they have to drive to get everywhere. So I think that our demographics are actually matching up pretty well with our transportation policies. So, you know, the aging boomers moving back in, and then also we're finding, I know my kids, for example, aren't really very interested in having a place where they need to mow a lawn or something. They like, they actually like to be in the places where they can go out at night.
Okay, I think that will be the last question. We did have one question about what you think that the impact of the Koch brothers' investment in political process. I think that's
I don't like it.
okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.